told you there was a foolproof list designed specifically to help you deepen your romantic relationships. Well, there is, and I'm going to give it to you in this video. Hi, I'm Jarrels. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I help couples find their happy. Today, we're talking about one of the most powerful tools you can use to build relationships. That tool is questions. Also, be sure to stay tuned to the end because I'm going to give you a surprising technique that's going to increase your overall romantic relationship satisfaction by almost 30%. All right, let's dive right in. First and foremost, you probably already know the importance of communication in a romantic relationship, but let me take a second to remind you why you should care. Couples that take the time to communicate on a regular basis, especially on a close and intimate level, share deeper bonds and a closer feeling of connectedness with their partner. I know communication can be tough, especially in new relationships where you're not completely sure what you should be talking about with each other. But don't worry, the best way to communicate with anyone and build a stronger relationship is going to be to ask questions and then listen to the answers they provide. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the best questions to ask for these different things. Number 1, getting to know one another. Number 2, deepening your emotional depth. 3, goal setting. Doing it together. The 4th is increasing understanding. 5th is conflict resolution. Number 6 is building trust. And the last is increasing intimacy. All right, I've got a big list of each question, but I'm only going to go over a couple of them in each section on this video because I don't want it to go too long. But don't worry, I've provided a complete list of the questions that you can use to print out, copy, and take with you in the description section below. Let's start with the first section, getting to know one another. Getting to know one another can be tough, especially if you're not completely sure what to do. First and foremost, use questions. But when you ask questions of each other, be sure that you use lighter questions. So what do I mean by lighter questions? I mean, don't ask them, what was it about your mom that made you so mad when you were a little kid? Or what did you hate about the way your grandmother treated you? Don't ask really hard, deep questions that don't need an answer quite as of yet. Let me give you some examples of questions you can use to build rapport and get closer to the person you're trying to grow with. One of the first questions I love to ask people is, where do you like to go when you travel? Or where do you like to go on vacation? And what do you love about it? Another question I like to ask is, what was the best thing that happened to you this year? Or, what's the best thing you did this year? Now, the reason that these questions work is because you're asking them things that are going to elicit memories or storytelling about something that they are excited about, something that they have a positive feeling over, right? Because you've asked about where's your favorite thing, or where's the best thing, or what was the best thing that happened. So when you ask questions that bring and elicit good feelings, those feelings get attributed to you because they're talking to you about them. So what ends up happening is while you're building rapport and you're starting to ask questions and get to know them, you're asking them things that are positive and happy, so they're going to think that that's you making them feel positive and happy, which isn't a bad thing. Section 2 is emotional intimacy. Now, why is this one so important? It's incredibly important because you need to be able to share your emotions with your partner. And couples that share their emotions with one another feel more open and more connected with each other because they're not hiding anything from one another. So when they're feeling bad, they can tell their partner, I'm feeling bad, okay? Without rah, 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 barking at their significant other. So how do we foster this emotional intimacy with one another? How do we get our partner to share their emotions with us? We don't just ask, how you feeling? That's not going to get it. Instead, we need to ask open-ended questions that are going to elicit a response that's going to make them feel comfortable enough to share with us. All right, one of the things I like to ask that really kind of gets the ball rolling is, when was the last time you truly felt understood by someone? When you ask questions like this, it makes them think back to a time where they truly felt understood. They're going to be living and experiencing the feeling of being completely understood. And when they're re-feeling that feeling, they're feeling it with you. This is a good thing. Next, you're going to ask them, what do you value most in a relationship or a friendship? And when they tell you, they're already going to feel understood. So while they're telling you what they value the most, they're going to end up probably projecting onto you those qualities that they find most valuable in relationships and friendships. The third section and the third thing you should be using for interpersonal communication is sharing goals, talking about things that you want out of life. Now, the reason this is important is because you're sharing what you want in the future. And very often, that thing you want in the future involves them. This helps to build confidence in your relationship and shows that you're seeing it in the future, so it's making it feel more comfortable and more solid. And especially if you can align your goals with their goals so that you're both pulling in the same direction at the same time, it builds and strengthens the bonds of the relationship. Here's a couple of questions that are going to explore not only individual, but shared goals in your relationship. The first question is an individual one, and it seems pretty basic. And I understand that when you hear this one, you're going to go, but listen, hear me out. You're going to ask them, are there any hobbies or interests that you'd like to explore more? Okay, you haven't asked them, do you have any hobbies that you like? Instead, you've asked, do you have any interests or hobbies that you'd like to explore further, that you'd like to know more about, learn more about? What this does is it invites not only them to explain what it is that they have an interest in, but it also invites them to invite you along the journey. The next one is a shared goal. So I've had couples ask me this a lot in therapy, and it often comes up to where they're just confused and don't know how to do it. It's because they haven't asked one another. And so I think the key here is to ask your partner, hey, how do you see us? And this is the best, not saying should we, but how do you see us integrating our friend circles into a joint shared group? Okay, by doing that, you're implying that it should happen if you want it to. And then you're asking, how should we do it? What should it look like? What could we do to make this transition or this shift as easy as possible, as comfortable as possible, and as mutually beneficial, not only for you as a couple, but also your friends? The next one obviously is going to come up, because especially if they don't agree on how you should be bringing your friends together, is conflict resolution. How do we end or stop? How do we buffer our conflicts that we have in a relationship? First, we need to understand what a conflict is. Okay, very often people, we fight. Do you fight or do you have a disagreement? And does every disagreement necessarily need to turn into a fight? I don't think that it does. I think once we have space in our relationship for our partners to have a different perspective than we do, it creates an openness to where we feel like we can share with each other in an intimate, open, and honest way without fear of being attacked. And when we are not being attacked, then conflict doesn't feel so bad. It isn't open battle. We're not fighting with one another if we're just having a discussion. So how do we facilitate having a discussion when we're already feeling the conflict starting to build? Well, here's a few questions that you can use. Okay, the first one is pretty easy. What do you think is the best way to resolve this conflict? Now, when you ask that, it makes it sound like you're interested in their thoughts about resolving the conflict, not accepting their position or them accepting your position. It isn't even about a winner or a loser. It's about the best way to resolve the fact that you can't agree. And once you take that on, then the problem is the problem. Each other isn't the problem. So you're not seeing your partner as the problem, and you're not seeing that your partner's inability to understand you as the problem. Rather, it's the issue that there is a conflict. And now the conflict in and of itself becomes the problem we need to resolve. How do we resolve it? Boom. We can both attack it together. We attack the conflict. It changes things. It's subtle, but it will change the way you feel about the way you guys interact. You can often do this by asking this question. Are there any shared values or goals that we can use to help resolve this conflict? By focusing on shared goals and shared values, it makes solving the conflict much, much easier. Again, you're doing it as a team against the conflict, and that's the key. That brings us to the next section, trust and intimacy. Now, absolutely, trust is imperative, and you cannot get there without having an intimate relationship with them. I'm not talking about sex or anything else. I'm talking about knowing someone on an intimate level, and you're not going to get there without asking questions. So what are some questions we can ask that'll help us maintain a deep level of trust and will actually deepen our levels of intimacy? The first one I like to ask is this: what does trust in a relationship look like to you? I know it seems like we should already know this, but realistically, everyone's got a little bit different definition of words and especially concepts. So when you're asking about trust, you need to know what their ideas of trust are and to know what it looks like in the context of a relationship. So ask them. The best way to find answers to the questions you have is to vocalize and ask the questions. The next question is going to help you get there a little bit quicker. And that is, are there any actions or behaviors that build trust with you in a relationship? Now, it's important to ask this because if you don't know what the behaviors are that will build trust, how are you ever going to know to do them? Right? They might be things that you're avoiding because you think, well, I want them to trust me, but I don't want them to feel like, I'm overdoing it. So ask what it is they want. When we know what their expectations are, we can fill them. If we don't know what the expectations are, then we may push right out into a boundary and right past one of their boundaries and end up breaking the trust we're trying so hard to build. All right, this last question is one, once you've established a little bit of trust, this one helps to truly deepen it. And the question I like to ask is this: is there anything that you've been hesitant to tell me that you think would deepen our bond? Now, when you ask this question, it's one that implies that they may have something they've been kind of holding back on. But why were they holding back on it? They're holding back on it because they think it's going to damage your bond, right? But very often, having and holding on to things is much worse and much more damaging to our bonds in relationships and friendships than it is to know the information and be able to move on from it. So by asking in this way, they can say, well, there was something, but I'm not sure. And they're going to be able to open up to you and be able to trust you enough to talk to you about it. All right, that's the last section. So the recap: communication is the secret to maintaining and building deep, strong romantic relationships. And the key to communication is asking questions. You now have a list of questions, when and how to use them. So I encourage you to do so. Remember, I have a bunch of additional questions that you can use in the description below. Be sure to grab those and take them with you. Now, for the simple technique that can increase your overall relationship satisfaction by up to 30% in just a few seconds. Ask your partner a thought-provoking question every single day. I know it sounds simple. I know it sounds silly. But when you take the time to ask a thought-provoking question, what you're doing is you're letting them know that you value their opinion and their insights. It also gets them thinking, and by having them think and ponder on something and then share their answers, they feel not only that their answers are important, but important to you. And then they're going to end up probably asking you questions as well, which is going to spark conversation and get the ball rolling. By sharing each other's thoughts, desires, and opinions, what it does is it builds intimacy. And so by actively building intimacy every single day, by doing it deliberately and intentionally, asking questions of your partner, you're going to show them that you value them, the relationship, and every single part of it. All right, be sure to give that a try. Now, that's all I've got for this video. So if you found it informational, please do give me a like and subscribe. And now I've got a question for you. Why do you think that asking questions of other people shows them that you have an interest in them? Leave your answers in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Bye for now.